The House is scheduled to meet today to discuss big tech and also to talk to big tech CEOs about the media's influence. Joining us right now for a preview of that hearing is cybersecurity and privacy law attorney Leeza Garber. Good morning to you, Leeza. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Jan.
So as we know, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, Jack Dorsey, they're all preparing right now for their hearing before Congress. What should we expect to hear from these CEOs of these big tech giants? Because this is not our first rodeo with them, and yet nothing seems to come out of this.
In the past 9 months, we have heard from these gentlemen quite a bit. We've had hearings after the election fiasco, misinformation online. So right now we're going to hear from Google, Facebook, and Twitter once again. And hopefully this will be a blockbuster hearing that's really fascinating to consumers as well. They're really going to be focused on misinformation, extremism on their platforms, and what they're doing to combat those two major issues. Because as we know, the pressure is mounting on big tech. They're dealing with COVID misinformation. They're dealing with the election misinformation. And then finally, the January 6th siege on the Capitol.
Yeah, speaking of which, what kinds of policies do they have in place currently to combat any kind of misinformation?
Each of these platforms really has a unique approach to combating misinformation and disinformation. Generally, they're looking at trying to talk to authoritative sources, whether that's government entities or separate entities that are trusted and legitimate. But they're also looking at, in Twitter's case, how the users of the platform feel about certain pieces of content. And Zuckerberg's pointing to different statistics about how they've really managed the crises of misinformation on their platforms. They're all coming at it a little bit differently, but they're all trying to fact check.
And some of it is very subjective, as we know as well, when you say that they're asking to get other people's opinions on some of this stuff. You know, something else that, of course, we're hearing a lot is Section 230. Of the Communications Decency Act. Interestingly enough, we know that both Democrats and Republicans take issue with Section 230, but for very different reasons. How do big tech companies view Section 230?
So just as a refresher, Section 230 really prevents liability for these big tech platforms for what consumers and users post. They're also allowed to moderate posts as they see fit. So it really gives them flexibility as operators, as platforms. Democrats and Republicans feel very differently. Republicans generally feel that there's too much censorship on the platforms, and Democrats are saying there's too little, that they need to do more. The big tech guys are saying, in Zuckerberg's case, yes, let's do more. And he actually, in his testimony for today, will talk about a new plan for Section 230, saying that these big tech platforms need to earn it, and they need to be transparent about their policies in terms of content moderation. Google and Twitter have been more silent about Section 230, but they're going to have to answer some tough questions today.
So in theory, it sounds great, right? Let's have a little bit more oversight on this. But then it becomes this whole question of who is the person that's overseeing the oversight and who determines that? Who determines what you can and cannot have on these sites when they're private?
This has been the eternal debate, Jan. Right now, we're talking to 3 men who are really in charge of the biggest big tech platforms in the world right now. So while they all have huge teams working on combating misinformation, extremism, violence on their platforms, they could certainly be doing more. And hopefully the questions that we hear today from the House will really point in the direction of what they're thinking in terms of legislation.
I'm going to ask you about one of President Biden's one of the people that he nominated, that's Leeza Garber, to join the Federal Trade Commission. We know she has a history of being, let's just say, a little strict when it comes to big tech.
Yes.
What should we expect to see under President Biden's administration when it comes to big tech when you think about someone like this who he nominated for the FTC?
So far, Biden is choosing some tech-critical folks for his administration, for sure. And Khan is just one example. We have some other people coming into the antitrust team as well. Khan is focused on the FTC, which is the de facto privacy regulator. These are big voices against big tech. They're really being critical of how they operate and saying they have too much power. And Biden has said this as well. So I think we'll see this play out in the next couple of years. We certainly already have the antitrust lawsuits. We have proposals of legislation for reforming how big tech operates. But as we know, government moves slow.
Yes, it's kind of glacial these days, in fact.
Yes.
It feels like sometimes. All right, Leeza, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.